The Comics Course is an offering of the lectures from Miskatonic University's Literature 209, Graphical Literature and Society and History, offered as a publicly available podcast. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Comics Course. This is your Professor Hamby here with my TA Rowan. Say hello, Rowan.
Hello.
Oh, we're doing another rant because it's still intramurals time period. And the Faraday cage is still up because, well, it's intramurals. And we all know what that means. Unfortunately. It'll be okay. At least you got over what happened with the cleaning of the grease trap in the kitchen.
Ugh.
Or are you still in therapy for that?
I'm still in therapy for that.
Okay.
I'm mostly over it, though.
It really does kind of suck that the kitchen staff are unionized, so they can't be made to do it, but we can make students do it.
Yeah.
Hey, I did it back in my day, too. I understand. But, you know, like I said on that episode of the podcast, if undergrad isn't for PTSD, then what is it for?
Debt.
That's fair. So, today, Ready Player One, which I thought I had some notes for, but I don't seem to actually have them.
It's okay, we're passionate enough.
Yep. Oh, I do have a few. Not much. So, Ready Player One. You and I listened to the book together.
Uh-huh.
I think I read it first and then mentioned it to you, and we listened to it together. There's a good audiobook production of it. It's quite good.
Yeah, I've listened to the full thing actually a couple times.
I have too.
I remember my most recent one was when this movie was actually announced.
Mm-hmm.
And I re-listened to it.
And we're not gonna bury the lead too much. The movie's not great.
No, it's not bad, but it's not good.
And this has a close connection to comic books. There are a number of comic book references in the book, although more video game and movie and music than comics, but there are some comics. And they pretty much all got removed from the movie as far as I can tell.
Yeah, okay. Let me rephrase what I said about it not being bad or good. It's not bad or good if you've never read the books. If you've read or / listened to the books, it is actually bad in my opinion.
Yes, I think that's fair. As a completely separate work, it's not bad. As an adaptation of the book, it's horrible.
Uh-huh.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and say one connection to comics that they don't even mention is the protagonist has two names. One is Wade Owen Watts, and the other is Parzival, which is his character in The Oasis.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, the general plot of Ready Player One, and by the way, spoilers are going to abound here, but we're long past the point of spoilers. If you don't want spoilers, stop listening, but...
And if you care about geeky stuff, the books are actually worth reading.
The book, the second one is questionable. I'll get to the second one in a second. But the general plot is that there's a future. Humanity has crapped the seat. And most people are very poor with a few mega corporations controlling everything. And their way of escape is also what has become a way of life for many people, this virtual reality environment called the Oasis. Which, depending on your level of wealth, you might interact with in different ways. And, you know, if you're poor, you might just have a simple visor set up that tracks your hands. While if you're rich, you can afford, you know, these suspension environments that let you move as if you're in zero gravity. And I have made many jokes about the microfiber crotch inlay of the full sensory suit.
Which is definitely not what I'm giggling about.
No, not at all. So you can range from today's level of immersion in VR to futuristic ones. Oh, they did just have Batman there for a second. Yeah. Warner Brothers produced this, so they were able to use DC properties. But I still would have preferred to also see manga references and other things. And one of the things they did is that between when the book was published and the movie was made, there were things that became big in popular culture that they put into the movie that weren't available in the book. For example, I think there is a Wakanda Forever reference.
I think so.
Which wouldn't have existed in the book. Yeah. I did think we saw the Flash there very briefly as the camera was panning.
Yeah, I think so too.
Again, another DC Warner Brothers property. So the theme of the book is that you get this absolute loser, Wade Owen Watts, whose parents died years ago. Mm-hmm. His father named him to sound like a Marvel character. Mm-hmm. They leave that out of the movie. Mm-hmm. And Wade Watts, like J. Jonah Jameson, Peter Parker, Reed Richards.
The best way to name your kid if you don't want him to get bullied in school.
Right. And Stan Lee was infamous for liking having these alliterative names. He said it actually helped him remember their names, because he wrote and edited so many books simultaneously. And that's left out. Mm-hmm. And then there was this guy who built the Oasis and owned all of it, basically. Mm-hmm. And he dies and leaves behind this extremely convoluted quest to find a golden egg, and whoever gets it will inherit the entirety of the Oasis.
And I think like $1 million cash prize.
Oh, no. I mean, there's not a cash prize. You own the Oasis.
Okay, I'm misremembering.
Which is the equivalent of inheriting like
billions of dollars.
Hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, the Oasis has more capital value than a lot of countries do.
Yeah, you're basically owning a vital part of
the world.
Of the world.
Yes, you're becoming a global power, a global superpower, if you get control of the Oasis. Uh-huh. But the references are so the reference riddle that's given is so obscure that by the time of the story starting, it has been like 10 plus years.
Yeah.
And nobody's even found the first clue. Mm-hmm.
And they have a scoreboard, which shows when people find the keys, because there's keys you have to find to get to the egg. And it's been 10 plus years and there's no one on the scoreboard. Right.
And this is a very, very big deal. And the protagonist, he is, by all standards, a loser. He is what is called a gunter, which means an egg hunter. Mm-hmm. And he is obsessed. And even though he grew up long after the pop culture obsessions of the guy who creates it, who passed away and left this behind, he has grown to love these things. And these are things from the 70s and 80s and 90s. And I have to admit, part of my love for it is that he obviously had a lot of the same pop culture interests that I did. Mm-hmm. But certainly not all. Not even a majority, I would say. Mm-hmm. But I think anybody who loves pop culture can see themselves in this in some way.
Yeah.
Even if you're not as obsessed as Halliday was and not as obsessed as Parzival becomes.
And you can still enjoy all the references throughout, even if you were like me and were born in the 2000s.
And I think in fact you've said that you've gone back and seen some of these movies and listened to some of the music and enjoyed some of it. Mm-hmm. I would be surprised if you did all of it. Mm-hmm. But in fact, some of it, look, I'm sorry, Lady Hawk was not a great movie. I remember it. But, it has its place in history. Mm-hmm. Certainly. And Halliday loved it, and it comes up along with all this other stuff. I mean, just, it's almost torrential.
The whole first book is a complete love letter to everything nerdy.
Yes. And it is a love letter to being nerdy. Mm-hmm. And I love it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's a great book. Now, it was lightning in a bottle. The author, Ernest Cline, is a script writer by profession primarily. And go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to say, which is so weird why this movie was so bad.
And he wrote the movie too. But I think there's a good reason for that. Mm-hmm. But let me mention, his other books, including his sequel, Ready Player 2, they're not as good. Uh-huh. They're nowhere near as good. And if you read Ready Player 1, and you are of the personality where the other books have to be as good, just stop and don't read them.
Yeah.
If you, like me, can accept that Ready Player 1 was magical lightning in a bottle, and Cline was channeling something, and you can accept that the other books are just mediocre, maybe a little bit good, then by all means, read all of them.
And you can just read the first book and not read the second one. The first one ends off in a perfectly fine place.
In fact, I disliked that people hounded for a sequel.
It didn't need one.
And I don't think one should have been written. I think it's okay. I read it. Mm-hmm. It was okay, but it's just okay.
I haven't read it. So
I'm not going to encourage you to. I just thought it was mediocre.
Yeah.
Very, very mediocre. And all the things that were great about Ready Player One weren't great in it. Mm-hmm. Including Owen Watts. Mm-hmm. Wade Watts. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Wade Owen Watts. You know, in the first book, I think he's clearly autistic.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But he's not a caricature. Apparently, people didn't understand he was autistic, so Klein ramped it up to 11 in the second book, and he comes across as a caricature of someone who's autistic, in my opinion.
And I think the reason people didn't realize he isn't autistic is they're so used to seeing autism as a character, a personality trait.
Right.
Meanwhile, his autism was the way real autistic people are. I'm not personally autistic, but I am neurodivergent. And right. I thought it was very obvious he wasn't neurotypical.
Right.
My first thought wasn't that he's autistic, but it was very clear that...
No, I thought he was clearly autistic, mm-hmm. and I thought he very clearly has a form of ADHD, a form of ADD. Mm-hmm. And it expresses through his hyper-focusing and these obsessions, which I have some sympathy with.
As someone who has been diagnosed with ADHD, I sympathized and kind of related to him in a lot of ways.
Right. And that becomes a virtue at times. He's named Parzival, which is the name of the knight who by himself discovered the Holy Grail, sometimes pronounced Percival, but he goes for more of the old school pronunciation, Parzival.
Which I appreciate because it's easier to say. And
so he is hunting for the Holy Grail, the egg. And his ability to obsess over these things is useful because he has to get into Halliday's head space to do it.
This is one of the few times where being non-neurotypical actually benefits you.
Right. But I didn't like the characterization in the second book. And in the movie, I feel like they took that away.
Yeah, they've turned his autism into like a caricature. He's just obsessive.
There's no autism.
He's just obsessive.
We don't even get a vibe that he's super obsessive. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the book, you are slammed with the real serious Gunters are going through all this media, all these games, everything Halliday loved in his life. And Halliday left behind a Bible of his favorite things for people. And here, what do we see? He goes and runs this race. That's it.
And another issue is I don't feel like they specified really what Gunters are. If I remember correctly, the phrasing in the book is Gunters are people looking for the egg.
Right, but there's some talk about gunting culture and how it's changed over time. Uh-huh. And how once the first key is discovered, gunting culture becomes big again, like it was right after Halliday's death and it was announced. This is all largely ignored in the movie, and it feels like there was some scene where things were explained that was left out.
Honestly, one of the biggest issues of this movie is pacing. It's all one after other.
It's boom, 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 boom.
And in the book, this process of him finally getting to the egg takes literal years.
Years.
Meanwhile, this felt like he found the egg in a week.
Right. And just stumbled into it almost by accident. In the book, it's a force of will. What he does in the book is like that, the actions of a knight-errant in medieval times. The name Parzival is important. He goes through trials. He suffers. He does things that are downright self-abusive to make it possible for him to get the egg. He is a knight on a quest where he may die during it. Mm-hmm. And the pacing feels epic.
Yeah. And it's one of the few times where I've read something where there's like a multi-year time skip that feels natural, that doesn't feel forced.
Right. It works. It works really well. While here it's just boom, 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 boom. And in the books, when we meet him, he's poor. His only connection to the Oasis is with a school-supplied headset. It's the absolute minimal possible because that's all he can get. And he has to hide that because it'll get stolen if he doesn't.
Because the world has gone to shit.
Right. And here, he logs in, he's got a custom avatar, he's got a cool car. I mean, he's not starting from zero.
Just to give you an idea, in the books, which they don't even touch on in the movie, which really pisses me off.
Right.
You have to pay the Oasis money, which is called credits, to go between worlds. And because he is shit-ass broke, he can't even get off the school planet.
Well, here as it opens, he's obviously porting around, zapping around places.
He clearly already has money.
And in the books, he's a loser. I mean, he's obsessed with gunting. He's obsessed with the hunt for the egg. But he's part of a subculture that people make jokes about now.
He is a fat, geeky loser in the start of the book.
Right. Here, he's an attractive guy.
Yeah, they basically put a standard attractive white boy and gave him glasses.
Right. And made him cool.
Yeah, I kind of knew when they announced the book they weren't going to make him at the start of the movie overweight. I knew they weren't going to do that. But I thought they would at least maybe get a guy who was maybe not typically attractive looking.
I mean, for those listening, one of the ways that Wade Watts makes himself get into shape by the end of the book is he literally puts protocols in place that feed him a controlled amount of food that he cannot override to overeat, and makes him exercise to unlock time access to the oasis that he can't override, or otherwise he won't do it.
He has to basically inflict self-abuse to make him lose weight.
And he does other things. What happens to Artemis in the movie, where she's locked inside the IOI debt center, he actually does to himself, and is far, far worse than what happens in the movie, and engineers it as a part of his quest for the Holy Grail, a.k.a. the egg. And it's brilliant, and it shows the depth of his focus and will. Here, they got rid of that. He doesn't know the movies like he does in the books. I mean, he goes and he watches things from Halliday's life, which is cheap BS. But in the books, he's a scholar. Yeah. I mean, maybe a scholar of useless pop culture, but nonetheless a true scholar.
You could pop quiz him on the last 40 years of Halliday's life, and he could tell you everything.
Right. And that obsession plays out with his focus in the hunt. Here, you don't get that obsession. You get geeky, awkward, teenage boy with hormones.
Okay.
Which is not it's not even half as interesting.
Let me get into something about his personality that kind of upset me.
Sure.
He's nice in the movie. He's an asshole in the books.
But I would say a relatable kind of asshole.
He's not... He means well, but he kind of...
He doesn't have social skills.
Yeah, that's part of his autism. He doesn't get people.
Right. And he only knows how to relate to people who share his interests.
Hence why he's very clearly autistic.
And he's very good friends with H, but nobody else. And he's a complex character in the book. There are things to dislike about him and things to like about him. Here, he's just kind of a putsy, hey, I'm a good guy. I mean, I'm awkward around girls, but I like girls. And hey, I'm a normal guy. And that's boring.
Also, and I have such an issue with the way they treated him and Artemis's romance.
Oh my god. And how they treated Artemis.
They made Artemis such a damsel in distress needing a man, and it pisses me off.
Well, let's back up to one thing here. Okay. Let's get back to Artemis and him. But I think we need to lay a little bit of groundwork.
Okay.
So one important thing people have to understand about movies is that literary, they are not like novels. People talk about adapting books into movies all the time, but you really don't. There's too much content. Short stories make good movies, not novels.
What makes good adaptations for novels is TV shows.
When you can do them longer.
Yeah.
If you can do them in the right format, that gets into discussing Rings of Power and other stuff again. We're not going to do that right now.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. But it can work better. I agree. If you can translate the novel format into a serial format.
Yeah, that can be kind of hard sometimes.
Yeah. Anyway, the way that books are usually adapted into movies, if it's done successfully, is if the book's structure is basically multiple parallel stories. One major plot with other subplots that the main plot is not 100% reliant on. And you do a little bit of sanding, and you do a little bit of tweaking. Maybe you condense these two characters into one, and you basically rip out of the novel a short story's worth of content to make the movie.
Yeah.
You cannot do that with Ready Player One. It is not one overarching story and a bunch of sub-stories. It is all one dense story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not subplots. There are no subplots. Just more content building up the one plot.
You would think with how long the novel is that there's filler. There's absolutely no filler. There are moments where you think, okay, this is maybe filler, but then it ends up tying up again to the whole thing. Like you would think his Perfect Game of Pac-Man is filler.
No, it's not at all.
But it ends up being super important at the end of the book.
And when you go back and reread it, there are clues all along the way.
That's one of the fun... Probably the best time I had reading the book was rereading it.
Right. It's better on a reread than the first time.
Which I've had very few books that are able to do that.
Right. And so when they made this into a movie, basically they took ideas from the book. Mm-hmm. Not even a skeleton, just ideas. Mm-hmm. And made a whole new thing.
Yeah,
and it has none of the heart that's in the book.
Yeah, this feels inspired by Ready Player One.
Right.
Not Ready Player One.
This is like you ask somebody to explain to you in 5 minutes what Ready Player One is, and you take that and write a movie off it.
Which just does not work.
No. Not as a translation. And now, as a whole separate work, it's a perfectly fine disposable movie. I found it, if I completely cut off thinking about the book, I was like, it's an okay sci-fi action movie. There's some spectacle in it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing to make me come back and want to rewatch it. I actually thought recently about re-listening to the book again.
I kind of want to do now, too, after the rants we've had.
Yeah. Because, I mean, the book is that good. And the challenges are beautiful and deep and engrossing. And here they're trivial. They don't even discover the first challenge in the movie. It's already been discovered and they just don't know how to solve it.
Meanwhile, he actually is the one who... Well, he's technically the
second one. Right.
See, that goes back to one of my core issues with this movie. They did Artemis so wrong.
They did wrong by Artemis. Now, one of the things about the book that you have to understand about Artemis is that she never is secondary to Wade. She is his equal. Absolutely. And in fact, we find out that she discovers the first key before he does. Not by a long time, just a few weeks, but she does. But she had not studied a part of Halliday's Obscura that to the depth that he had. And because there's so much, it's hard to study all of it.
Yeah.
In this case, the mastering of a particular arcade game, Joust. But because he had studied it, he was able to get the key first.
And she's pissed at him.
And, right. And they are rivals as much as they are attracted to each other. Because they are both hunting for the egg and they don't clan up. The only time they help each other is when one has helped the other and you got to repay them so the scales are balanced.
Yeah, there are moments where Wade tries to do shit for her.
And she's like, fuck no. This is me. And he's not attracted to her because she's a girl.
He's attracted to her personality.
He's attracted to her knowledge. In the books, it's firmly established that he's been following her blog posts and her Twitch streams. I think at the time he called them YouTube because they didn't have Twitch yet at the time.
Yeah.
But he is attracted literally to her mind. She is a hunter for the egg to rival him. And that is attractive to him.
It's not, ooh, pretty girl.
Right. He really does not give a shit how she looks. Here, he first meets her. There's no indication he's ever heard of her before. All he goes is, I could bone that avatar.
Yeah. His whole attraction is, ooh, pretty girl, teenage hormones go woo.
That both damages her as a character and damages him as a character.
And they really failed her kind of pushing him away at the start of the book. Because she seriously pushes him away because she wants to hunt for the egg. And she doesn't want the baggage of a relationship.
Right.
Meanwhile, here her pushing away is, like, playful.
Right. And there's an implication that she needs him to discover the first key.
Yeah, the first key, she watches him do it and then repeats it. Meanwhile, she actually finds it first in the book.
Right.
And another thing about the first key, They completely changed it, and I hate it
And there's no indication that she's a real gunter, really, in the book, in the movie. Mm-hmm. She never expresses a really deep knowledge of gunting the way she does in the book. Of course, to be honest, I don't think he really does either. It's like they decided they really wanted to peel back on the geekiness.
I guess to make it more manageable for non-geeks.
And this part where they go back and see this video, this recreation of a moment of Halliday's life for the clue. No. In the book, the challenges are deep. Mm-hmm. It's not wade through millions of hours of video and find the one thing that's relevant. It's take these 50 different things from millions of hours of content and combine them in just the right way.
Yeah, okay. And here's another thing that bothers me to help Brooke. And it ties back to the fact that he has money at the start of the book.
Yes.
The fact that the fact that it's not on a school planet.
Yes. So we started on this, and I think we branched off the topic. But in the book, he has a school supply advisor, and he's on a school planet, attending school, and that's it. He can't afford to go to other planets. He has to get a special thing to be able to visit another planet, to go watch his school sports team.
Which is paid for by the school.
Right. He has no money, and that was important because Halliday's goal, what Parzival figures out is Halliday would only put the first stage of this somewhere everyone could get to it regardless of how poor they were. Mm-hmm. And that Halliday coded the school planets himself and in his own lifetime made them accessible because of grants to every student who wanted to attend school there. Mm-hmm. So literally anybody can be at the school planets, which were all cloned from each other, and have the same access, and that Halliday would want it accessible to a kid.
Clearly hoping a kid would find it.
And would synergize. And the idea that Halliday is autistic, clearly, in some ways even more autistic than Wade Watts, is a major theme of the books that the movie has present but kind of skips over. The movie also fails to change up something from the book in a way that bothers me, but from a storytelling standpoint. But yes, so that he doesn't start from nothing like he does in the book. In fact, he has a cool car. He has the Back to the Future Zemeckis car.
Which makes no sense. And they never explain why he lives in this, like, old abandoned car.
Well, I mean, I think in the Oasis, that sort of car is probably more accessible to average people.
No, I mean, like, in the real world, why he's living in the abandoned car. And why his setup's there. They never explain why he's in it. Right.
They do in the book, but they don't in the movie.
It's so he can hide his shit.
So it doesn't get stolen by his own family.
Yeah, they don't really emphasize, A, how much of a hellhole abusive household he's in, or B, how bad the real world is and why everyone's escaping into the Oasis. Their equivalent at the start of the movie is the Oasis is so good everyone's in there.
Right.
And they briefly go, oh, the world's really bad.
But all of this served to underscore him as the knight errant.
Yeah, he's so much of an underdog. His parents are dead, and the people who adopted him are bullies.
And abusive. Yeah,
physically
absolutely.
And emotionally.
Right. So, I mean, this is all problematic. The representation of IOI as a bad guy, I think, is fine.
Yeah,
although
it was a little bit more cartoonish than I like.
Yeah. I thought they felt more real and dangerous in the book in a lot of ways. And I thought Nolan Sorrento, in part from having more time in the book, was more effective as a bad guy. Mm-hmm. The whole thing about... there are several things in the movies I didn't like with Sorrento. Although I thought the actor did a good job on the script. Yeah. I'm not putting that on the actor.
I actually think the actor who plays Nolan Sorrento is actually the best actor in this whole movie.
Yes, I agree with that. He's very good.
I actually don't like the acting in this movie.
Overall, it's not good.
The guy who plays Wade is so fucking boring.
He is.
I understand he wasn't given a good script.
But, yeah. No, I agree with all that. I absolutely agree. And things like here where he's running around collecting stuff, it's just stupid.
Because in the moment where he's like getting stuff from the book, it feels like a big deal because for once he has money. Meanwhile, here he just looks like a rich kid on a
buying spree. Right.
Unlike a kid who went from nothing to having money.
Right. In the book, he has a dialogue, an internal dialogue about not I can buy cool toys, but an internal dialogue of I might be able to eat regularly now.
I don't have to stay at the school planet anymore. I can join the Gunter little club place they have.
I can order food to be delivered to me and not rely on scraps that my aunt and her boyfriend are willing to have after they've filled up with eating. I mean, this is a big deal. So, oh man. So many problems. Lack of scale, lack of depth, lack of heart, lack of complexity. And thematically, major problems. You know, leaving the school planet also meant they left out the D&D references with the dungeon. And part of the problem with that, in my mind, is there was a sort of progression where in the books, you kind of see this travel log, progression might be the wrong word, but a survey of Halliday's life and obsession with games.
And him growing up.
Right. And D&D was the first.
And it's no coincidence that it's on a school planet and the thing is the Tomb of Horrors.
Right.
D&D while you're still in school.
And for many people of that generation, I mean, people still play tabletop RPGs now, of course. D&D 5th edition is very popular. Pathfinder 2nd edition is popular. There are others like Fade and whatnot. But for a certain generation, of which Halliday was one of, playing D&D was a rite of passage. And it was the first exposure to gaming in a lot of ways.
For a lot of people of that generation.
Right.
And I feel like they totally missed the mark there.
Right. They completely lost it.
So not only did they keep it on an accessible planet, they took away the D&D thing, but they made it a fucking race car event.
Which is just felt cheap.
At least keep it as a board game.
Right.
Make it a bad D&D Tomb of Horrors ripoff if you can't get the rights from Wizard of the Coast.
Right, exactly. And I'm sure I'm sure they could have come up with some board game that looked too, like D&D, but wasn't. I mean...
hell, get permission to do something similar from a different company, like Pathfinder or something.
Paizo would have jumped all over that shit, I'm sure. And actually seeing, 3D animated Galarian goblins and stuff would have been really cool.
It didn't have to specifically be D&D.
No.
Just a role-playing game.
But it might have required more time than they had. Now, let's talk about one thing that is good. The relationship with H.
Yeah, they did that good.
They did well on that.
They clearly established them as long-term bros till the end.
Now, the relationship with Shoto and Daito, sorry. They really got glossed over and made tertiary unimportant characters.
They didn't even really explain that they were Gunters and friends, just they show up here getting the tail end of the leaderboard. Right.
And they replicated from the book the event where everybody on the planet is killed except the person with the one start over opportunity. But previous to that, I'm not going to say who. I'm going to try to stay away from the spoiler. But one of the high five dies. And it's a powerful emotional point in the book.
I literally cried the first time I read it. I think I actually cried even rereading it for the first time.
Yeah. And that's part of this having no heart. I mean, even though there is an attempt made on Wade's life, it doesn't feel big. I mean, in the books, it sends him on the run. And he has to build a new life. Here, he's conveniently kidnapped at that moment anyway, so he never has to make a choice about how it affects his life.
Also, I know this is silly and small, but I hate the not inclusion of Mrs. Gilmore.
Yes, it gave him his one real personal connection to the world. So when she dies, it hurts.
She's mentioned very briefly at the very start of the movie, and he doesn't even say hi to her. He's actually, the biggest dick moment he has is to her ignoring her.
Which, if you haven't read the book, isn't a big deal. But if you've read the book, it's a big deal. And her death, and when IOI tries to kill him, is a powerful point in the book because his old life is over. He has now been... It's like the moment in the Arthurian legends when shit gets real. And it's not just, okay, should I go do this? It's you actually have to commit your life now. And all of that gravitas is lost completely in the movie.
They don't even mention in the movie that she has cats. They don't even mention that she's kind of a cat lady.
But the lack of mentioning the High Five member who dies at the end and integrating that in the story, again, you can't have heart without caring, and you don't care about anybody in this movie, even the protagonist.
Yeah, Wade could have died in this movie, and it would have been like, not interesting enough still.
Yep. Okay, one comic book reference here with the Clark Kent glasses.
Which, meh.
Yeah, it's fine.
Meh.
It's an okay scene.
Yeah.
They cut out Spider-Man from the finale.
They cut out the mechas.
The lack of mecha content is unforgivable. If you're gonna make a fucking CGI 3D movie, why do you leave out the coolest stuff for representation from the book?
And maybe it's just me because I never imagined this way, but his Bible being a museum.
Oh, it's a cheesy ripoff.
That's not how I imagined it to be at all. Maybe that's on me.
No, in the book, the Bible is a giant data store. You know, they mention that, there's actually an event in the book where they do a full 3D environmental recreation of Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail, which is so appropriate. But in the Bible form, it's just the video movie of the Holy Grail as you and I could watch it today. And same for all the music and the video games and all that stuff. It's interactive. It's living the content as Halliday did, not watching Halliday live it.
Yeah.
Their only knowledge of Halliday doesn't come from these painfully convenient scenes of watching his life, but have to be reconstructed from old news articles and all that, which aren't in the Bible. Yeah. He only gave the media content in the Bible. Everything else about his life, they have to hunt for.
Hence why they're Gunters.
And so it trivializes. I mean, literally, they're like, here's a building where you can watch everything that's important, and we're going to tell you the answers here. They don't even know that the answer is in the Bible. And of course it's not. Just information to help them not figure it out, but when they run into things, have context. I mean, to give some explanation, there's nothing in the Bible to point him towards the wooded areas of the school planets. Nothing at all.
But there is information on Joust, which you need.
Right. And there's information on the Tomb of Horrors, which you need. So it doesn't help you solve any of where you get. It just, if you've studied it enough, it might help you get through the challenges once you get there.
But it doesn't give you any clues to what the challenges are.
Right.
Hence why, at the start of the movie, it's been 10 years? And no one's still even found the first clue.
I think over 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. Now, we find out that Artemis, a few weeks before him, figured it out also. But he's able to beat the challenge before her. And he goes from being a level 1 to, I think he gets enough experience to be level 20 instantly, which is another D&D reference and a clue that Halliday wanted this to be for kids because in D&D, level 20 is the max level. So he's automatically given that. And then, of course, he has the wealth and resources to go out and quickly go up to the artificial level cap of 99.
Which goes to show you that he wanted a kid to find it, and then for the kid once getting the money after solving the first puzzle to be able to go on and do the rest.
Right. And after that, level doesn't really matter so much. But it gives him freedom to move and not be PK'd, player killed, when he goes into contested zones instantly.
Yeah, so he can go get his gear and stuff.
Right. Okay, the lack of the mechas at the end, I had a problem with. I felt the scale, even though they visually filled the screen with stuff, it still felt smaller scale than the book to me.
It felt emotionless and empty, and a lot of it felt like weird cash grabby ads almost.
Right. And in the book, it felt like the culmination of this battle between good and evil. Mm-hmm. And there were personal losses and sacrifices and more people you thought might be dead and weren't. Uh-huh. And there were emotional moments. Here, when Wade meets Samantha, the real person behind Artemis, it has no impact at all. In the book, when they finally meet, you're on the edge of your fucking seat.
Yeah, like, how are they going to react?
Right. And H was, I thought, better handled in the book.
Actually, I feel like H was the best representation of any of the characters in this.
I agree with that.
It still wasn't good, but was the best.
Right. Now, here, that actually ties in to my biggest thematic problem with the book versus movie. And it's something that I almost like about the movie. Mm-hmm. So, in the book, the culmination of everything relies on Wade figuring out a major regret of James Halliday. Uh-huh. And the regret had to do with the woman he loved that he never connected with.
Uh-huh.
Kira. Who ended up marrying his best friend. Uh-huh. And it's very well done. They decided to change that for the movie. And it becomes about Halliday regretting losing his friendship with the best friend, not the failure to connect with Kira.
Which I actually kind of liked.
I did too. Here's the problem, though. Mm-hmm. It worked in the book because it paralleled the autistic Wade's attempt to connect with Artemis/Samantha. Uh-huh. And you got that parallel where Halliday clearly wanted somebody who was like him to inherit the egg and inherit the oasis, but to be wiser than him and to understand that the real life was important and understand that taking this thing that's fun and obsessing about it and letting it consume the entirety of your life was unhealthy and to not do that. So, in the movie, they continue the parallel between him and Samantha, but then they change that thematic point over to the friendship. But if they wanted a powerful parallel like they had in the book, they needed to do something between him and H.
Instead, throughout basically the whole movie, it's him giving puppy eyes at Artemis.
So, I mean, in the book, he has this powerful conflict with Artemis that mirrors this major thematic struggle that Halliday is presenting. While in the book, he has this struggle with Artemis, which plays off like complete weak sauce, and then the thematic point doesn't parallel it. Mm-hmm. It's weak. It's weak.
And I think one of the worst parts about Artemis's character in this is she needs him to do the puzzles.
Right.
Meanwhile, through big chunks of the book, they never interact.
Right.
Hell, there's a point where she kind of ghosts him. And he's trying to get in contact with her, and he's like, no, I'm hunting for the egg. I'm hunting for the egg. Leave
well, she tells him explicitly, you're a distraction. I like you, but I'm first to the egg. Uh-huh. And I'm not talking to you because you're a distraction to me. Uh-huh. And, I mean, I really didn't know that he would necessarily be the one to get the egg.
Honestly, I would have been a really cool plot twist if she actually would have been the one.
And I thought that could have happened in the book.
It actually felt like a real race between him and Artemis.
And the big twist at the end, where he was able to have the opportunity when no one else could, was well done. Uh-huh.
And I like that in the second book, she completely gets the key with nothing to do with him. He has to find out through the scoreboard.
And what enables him to ultimately be the one that gets the key was, in a way, luck. Mm-hmm. But Here's something thematically I think some people have missed in the book. Okay, so a major spoiler for the book here for anyone listening who hasn't read it.
Who's still listening this far and hasn't read it.
Right. In the course of the book, Wade is... The book takes place over years and years. Mm-hmm. I think multiple years. Anyway. At one point, he goes to this arcade planet, and he finds in this little out-of-the-way place, like almost an abandoned dark corner of some street, a Pac-Man machine. Mm-hmm. And he thinks back to Halliday playing a perfect game of Pac-Man. So he stops and decides, what the hell? I'm going through all these places in the Oasis, all these obscure planets that have a connection to Halliday. I'm going to stop and play this game of Pac-Man on this world he built.
Because he's reached a dead end.
He's just trying random stuff, hoping to find a connection.
He's emotionally and physically broken at this point.
Right. He plays a perfect game, and he gets a quarter that goes in his inventory. Mm-hmm. And he can't tell what it's for. Mm-hmm. He can tell it's special because no analysis works on it. Which even most artifacts, magic works for analysis on in the Oasis.
Yeah, which is why he's so confused.
But he knows this had to be one of the early Oasis artifacts. An artifact coded by Halliday himself. Mm-hmm. But it could just be a cosmetic artifact. It doesn't necessarily have power. Mm-hmm. So he forgets about it. Mm-hmm. And instead, in the movie, it's just given to him as a Deus Ex Machina.
By Mr. Robot.
Right. Who we find out has a special connection to everything and isn't really a robot. And like I said, the movie has a lot of Deus Ex Machinas in it. To make things convenient and move it along as fast as possible.
So we can speed run these 2 hours.
Right. Now, and you think this is pointless in the book. And you forget about it by the time you get to the end. And it turns out it's an artifact that gives you a second life. It's like putting another quarter in the machine of Pac-Man and getting to keep playing.
Which is perfect.
So he's able to survive this apocalyptic event that's killed everybody else in this whole sector of the Oasis and has killed him. But now he's alive, he can collect all their stuff, and he can go get the egg. Mm-hmm. And it emphasizes this thematic point where this was not part of the quest. This was not Halliday generated. This came about because of the events of the other players. Mm-hmm. But his willingness to stop and try to play a perfect game of Pac-Man in this random place, not egg-related. Because even he at the time goes, he's pretty sure it's not related. I mean, maybe it is. What the hell? He just wants to play a perfect game of Pac-Man, really.
He wants a de-stressor.
And that is what ultimately lets him win. And the enjoyment of the game not as an obsession, but just as something to enjoy.
As casual fun.
Is what ultimately allows him to actually win. Mm-hmm. And that's a great thematic point. That's totally missing from the movie. Mm-hmm. Also, can I say, while I'm thinking about it, I meant to mention it earlier, the game of Joust in the Tomb of Horrors is literally what gives the book and movie its name, which is left out of the movie entirely.
Ready Player One.
You walk, for those who don't know, in the old days of arcade machines, some of them had 1 or 2 players.
Please tell me the tale of your time.
And it was a cool time. And the fact that these don't exist in America anymore is a sign of how America has gone to shit.
True.
Because these were like pubs for kids. Mm-hmm. We didn't have beer, but we could hang around, make arcade machines, and talk.
Yeah, we're still told to go outside. When there's nothing else.
Well, that's because a lot of adults are hypocrites.
Sure.
Have I told you to go outside and play?
No.
No. So there's literally the thing that gives the book its name, and therefore, or arguably the movie its name, is completely left out.
Yeah.
Just and
done racing.
It's a symbolic moment because to that point, Artemis is the leader. She's not on the board yet because she hasn't gotten the key. But once he steps up to the joust machine, he is player 1. But what he has to discover over the course of things is you can't live life as a single player game. And that theme is totally missing from the movie. The movie is a shallow action film.
And he's basically perfect in the movie. He has no flaws. Meanwhile, he goes down basically a mental breakdown when it comes to the second egg, and she actually is the one who finds it first.
His life is brutal. What he does ultimately to protect Artemis and the others when he decides to go after IOI is powerful. Mm-hmm. I mean, he sacrifices himself.
Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, the way they find the second clue for the second key is they're basically flirting, and she has an oh my god moment.
Right.
And then she doesn't find it on her own, alone. Instead, they figure it out together.
Right. And the book...
And the only reason she's the one who gets it first is something happens to the others, and she's the only one left there.
The book has elements of what make My Hero Academia great. Mm-hmm. Part of what drives the plot of My Hero Academia, both the manga and anime, is that you have these people in this Class 1A who are badasses, and they push each other further while competing. They support each other while competing. And in a way, that's what the High Five do. They're all badasses. They're all equals. And their actions and their will, their agency push the story. Here, the story just happens. I mean, there's very little... I mean, even Wade. I mean, he doesn't move himself to Columbus, seal himself in a room, obsess over the quest, and then create a fake identity and get kidnapped by IOI and do an amazing badass breakout. No, he just gets kidnapped.
By Artemis.
And everything just happens.
He is a passerby in his own fucking life. He's a passenger in his own life.
The movie is so shallow. I'll be honest, I don't even remember what the third egg was in the movie. What the third key was.
I think it was the arcade game.
Oh, yeah.
With the ice. That was like the one thing they did in the book did.
Right, which they made different from the book. A little bit.
Yeah, they still did.
They made the video game component different. In the book, it was an obvious but nice recall to the first actual Easter egg. While here, they had it not be that. But, I mean, in trade-off, I mean, you miss shit like, in the book, the second key, I mean, gets into Schoolhouse Rock, and 70s prog rock, and space operas, and singing together as a group of three, stuff.
And we go see Holiday's house from when he was a kid in the 70s.
Right. And oh my, when they start digging up stuff that I just think of as brilliant little bits for people to read. I mean, he's reading about Captain Crunch and the signal whistle that was used for hacking Ma Bell back in the day, all of which is real. And, you know, the Zork stuff from the old text games, which, I mean, even if those games aren't great by today's standards, they're a real part of history now. And all that depth is gone here.
Yeah, the movie is so shallow with no heart and mostly very mediocre acting. And yet,
they did replicate the one scene from the book that I thought was just ridiculous crap, which was the whole Nolan Sorrento thinks he's in the real world scene when he's really in the Oasis.
Which was such a poor scene, but you were able to overlook it because the rest of the book was so good.
Right.
Yet the one scene they like go word for word perfect accurate is that.
Right. Yeah.
The one time where you can tell the writer thought he was clever when he wasn't.
Right. And in the end, the movie has no depth, no complexity, no heart. While the book has all that.
Because even though Wade's a dick at times during the book, you're still rooting for him.
Well, he's a full character. He's a rounded character. He's a complex character. And, I mean, I know that movies are like short stories. You're not getting a ton of time. They're often going to be simple characters. But, I mean, that's one of the reasons I like books. I like big, complex stories.
Yeah, this book was too big and too much for a simple 2-hour movie. And it would have needed to be Lord of the Rings length, if not longer.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a major challenge, but I think this would have been like an 8-hour movie, which they obviously would have had to have broken up into parts. But then you might have been able to do it justice.
But that's what they need to do, because the book was broken up into parts.
Right. I mean, at an absolute minimum, 2 hours per key.
Uh-huh.
Maybe 3.
Instead, they had to push everything into 2 hours, and it did not work. It did not work.
I think the first key you might be able to do in shorter. The first key you might be able to do in an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
But like the second key, that was a long time they were looking for the second key.
Yeah, it took them years.
Yeah.
Literal.
Well, that's our rant. Do you have anything else to rant about for Ready Player One?
No.
It just was incredibly disappointing.
Like, I went into it not expecting much. I knew the moment it was announced and it was going to be 2 hours, this was not going to work. But it did even worse than my expectations. And my expectations were already on the ground.
See, it did exactly what I thought it would do. And I thought this was, as far as making a film, the smart way to do it. They made something that was fundamentally something else. Because there was absolutely no way for them to actually adapt the book and even come anywhere near what they would have needed it to be.
Yeah, I was hoping the acting was going to be better than what it was.
Yeah.
And
I get that.
And I did not think the puzzles were going to be as drastic of a change. I knew they weren't going to be what they were in the books, but I thought they were at least going to try and keep the feel.
No, they didn't even come in the same territory. They weren't in the same postal code.
I thought they were at least going to attempt something with the same vibe.
Nope, not at all.
No.
Okay. Well, I think the final message for people, if you've listened to this whole rant, is if you want to watch the movie, okay, but you probably should skip it. Read or listen to the book. The book, by the way, is narrated by Will Wheaton. He does a great job with it. Mm-hmm. Available on Audible and whatever other platforms have that stuff.
It's a great listen while you're doing other stuff.
If you want to read another Ernest Cline book, I probably would skip Ready Player 2. It just felt very disappointing as a follow-up. He has another book called Armada. It's nowhere near as good as Ready Player 1, but it's a fast read, and I think an enjoyable little read. But don't go into it expecting a great book.
Yeah.
Okay. Which actually, I think Armada would make a great movie. Mm-hmm. I think it is simple enough that it could be condensed down for a movie.
Cool. Oh, wait. One more thing. Sorry, that I just remembered to talk about.
Go for it.
Why the fuck is Artemis running, like, a little, like, gang almost?
That's a good question.
What the... Because she's a fucking blogger and streamer in the book, not a gang leader.
And she's no indication of why she'd be running that gang either. It's all weird.
And they
or how they found Wade.
Yeah, because they tried to clearly go for the vibe of she's not a mob boss. She's not doing anything
right, they're like underground revolutionaries fighting the system. Although it's not clear how they plan to fight the system, except maybe getting the egg. Which, to be fair, if they got, would allow them to change the world.
But she somehow knows where Wade lives, recognizes him.
Look at this! The guy is waiting for him inside his secret place.
And he's bald with a tattoo. He looks like a gangster.
And the only people who know who he is are IOI. So
How does she know?
Right.
So on top of basically being turned into a mob boss, she's a little bitch in the scene too where he meets her.
Yeah.
Where she's like, "You won't think I'm pretty." Shows the equivalent of a birthmark.
Now, maybe I'm projecting here. And in the book they only describe the birthmark. Mm-hmm. But they make it sound like it kind of has a grotesque element to it.
Like there's a fair reason for her to be a little insecure.
I mean, it is on the larger size on her face, and it's a wine stain kind of birthmark. But, I mean, I don't know. In my book, if you're looking at a cute chick and that's bothering you, you need to reevaluate, your standards.
Yeah, and I understand as a woman being insecure about things that aren't really a big deal, but my issue with it is it's so small that it could be covered up with foundation.
Right. And
if she was that insecure about it, she could wear makeup, and she clearly is wearing makeup in the movie.
Right. And, just my viewpoint of the world is, if you see a girl who's attractive, and you're like, I'd like to ask her out, and that is really bugging you, then you're not actually interested in a woman, you're interested in a Barbie doll.
Yeah, and I don't know, they made her seem so pathetic caring so much about this.
Right.
And they made her sound like a teenage
Well,
girl.
they wanted her to both be attractive, but insecure.
Uh-huh, and it comes off as such, like, Wattpad protagonist.
Wattpad protagonist. I love that. That's a great description. She is. She's a Wattpad protagonist.
Mm-hmm. Self-insert.
Self-insert. We're going to be pitiful and awesome at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is a Twilight Bella vibe going on here. While in the book, it's described as, I felt, much more than that.
Like, all across this side of her face.
It really could be disturbing to some people.
Uh-huh.
And more black and blue than Weinstein.
Like, she might actually get stares in public for it.
Like, I mean, the way they're presenting it, it's so light, some good foundation would cover most of it
Uh-huh.
In the book, it's like, nothing's covering that shit up.
When I say you could cover up with makeup, I'm not talking about, like, futuristic makeup. I mean makeup now in 2023.
Right.
Could cover it up.
And part of his redeeming character traits in the book is he really, really, really doesn't care.
She could look like anything and you'd still be attracted to her.
Right. And something they left out of here but was great in the book is when H turns out to be a female, they have a moment of where he seems upset.
Mm-hmm. And
you're like, oh God, is he being an asshole about this?
Uh-huh.
And, you do have to give some credit. If somebody's lied to you, even if it's about something like that, that can be uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. But what we discover is he talks to H and he says, when we talked about stuff, when we talked about girls and all this stuff, were you being dishonest with me?
Uh-huh.
And H says, no, I'm a lesbian. And everything I ever said was completely sincere and true.
The only thing I lied to you about was the fact that I'm a girl.
Right. And then Wade has no problem. Mm-hmm. So his problem was that the things that they had real emotional talks about, relationships with women, dealing with insecurities about sex, stuff like that, was a lie. And once he finds out that was not a lie, well, lying about your gender is irrelevant. That's not who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And so he's fine with it.
And it's a real defining moment of he's a good guy.
Right. He has problems.
But all people do.
He can be an asshole at times. Mm-hmm. We all can be.
Uh-huh.
But he is fundamentally
a good person.
Right.
Who cares about his friends.
Maybe not the rest of the world, but honestly, I think most people that claim they want to save the whole world are lying.
Maybe it's just me, but I kind of related to that.
Huh?
To only really caring about your friends.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I would like the whole world to be happy.
Uh-huh.
I support economic programs to get rid of poverty for people I don't know. I want people I will never meet to have a happy, secure life. But as far as my personal emotional energy to spend, it's a pretty small group.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for most people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think we are done.
Mm-hmm.
Right as they get to The Shining.
Which I thought this portion of the movie was so fucking boring.
I'm willing to bet. I thought this was a horrible choice for the movie. Mm-hmm. And I have not checked, but I'm willing to bet Warner Brothers owns the rights to it. And so it was easy for them to use.
I bet you money on that too.
Yep. All right, and with that, this rant is over. Mm-hmm. Class is dismissed, but if you need to talk to the professor, listen on. My link tree is at linktr.ee/. Prof Hamby. That is PROFHAMBY. That has all the places that I post announcements about new episodes, including the huge variety of podcasting services and YouTube that I drop them on. Additionally, I actually spend a little bit of personal time on a couple of networks, specifically Twitter. That's at Prof Hamby, PROFHAMBY, and on Tumblr, where the blog is called simply Comics Course. And I also, for some of my more narrative cast episodes, also post the transcriptions or notes from my podcasts. I'll see you around, and if you want to contact me, DMs are always open.